A professional counselor in the Dallas area is growing in popularity for his treatment methods.
How do you talk to kids about terror? And with social media and television, it's everywhere, and it's unavoidable for kids.
Rusty Lozano is the founder of the Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy. He's also been nationally recognized for his work with brain mapping.
He's created a gym to work out the mind. His office features an obstacle course.
Rusty Lozano is a licensed professional counselor, helping children with headaches, with anxiety, ADHD, and more.
Here's where Lozano comes in. He teaches kids how to think their pain away with something called biofeedback.
A North Texas therapist is treating patients in this unconventional way.
We have Rusty Lozano who's joining us today. He's a licensed professional counselor.
He put together an unusual treatment for teenagers who are struggling with mental issues, except he's taking this now a step further.
Rusty Lozano, a leading therapist and pediatric biofeedback therapist based in Texas at the Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy. And Rusty, thanks for being with us tonight.
Rusty Lozano, a father of 4 and also a professional counselor in Texas, says it's all about being a credible resource to your children.
The Therapy Hour with Rusty Lozano, your dedicated resource for mental health news, views, and tips you can use. Brought to you by the Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy in Addison, Texas. And now, here's Rusty.
And good afternoon. Welcome to the Therapy Hour. I'm your host, Rusty Lozano. And you are tuning in to KFXR Talk Radio 1190. Boy, do we have a good topic today. I have 3 girls in my household, and I'm coming across information, and I'm learning more as I watch the news, and I'm learning about the trend with young girls and even my own son with the things that are happening out there, the news and these sexting allegations and sexual misconduct, and it seems like there's a lot going on circulating around this topic. So the topic of sexting, what is it? What do we do about it? How much do we know? This becomes an essential tool for parents to understand and really really start to get ahead of the trend because we never know what our kids actually know. It's interesting, my own son, I've asked him questions about, when there's been random things happen like terror attacks, like, what do you know about what's happening? And the things that he can explain to me, I'm like, wow, where did he get that information from? Because I didn't tell him. But let's talk a little bit about this topic of sexting. What is it? I'm going to give you a brief description, and then I'm going to introduce my guest today. But sexting is sending, receiving, or forwarding sexually explicit messages, photographs, or images, primarily between mobile phones. It also includes the use of computer or any digital device. The term was first popularized in the early 21st century and is an impromptu of sex and texting, where the latter is meant to more in the wide sense of sending a text, possibly, with images. In 2012, the word sexting was listed for the first time in the Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary. So it is a very widely used terminology now. But here to talk to us more about this is Dr. Susan Istre. She's the director of the Center for Social Success in Dallas. And she has been visiting private schools and churches and around the Metroplex with this message on sexting. Susan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rusty. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, thank you for being here. When I first started learning about the information that was coming out with your statistics, it was really intrigued, and it scared me. I was actually just finding myself wondering, well, what else do I not know about what's happening with our kids these days? But can you shed a little bit of light on this topic of sexting? Let's first talk about, maybe introduce the topic in with your terminologies and see where we go from there.
Sure. Well, you are absolutely right in the definitions that you cited. I think what's important to know is that in Texas, it's not just sending or receiving or forwarding explicit messages or photos, but it's through any electronic means, which includes the computers and other digital devices. Texas law targets the people who create it, which might be the girl who takes a picture of herself, who sends it, which again could be the girl, or it might be kept by a boy that she sends it to and then forwarded to other people. So everyone in that chain of events is considered to be culpable as participating in sexting and is subject to the penalties in regard to that.
Yeah, as you talk about that, I think primarily about females. But is it really, it involves more than females. It's our males as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah, but when you think about it, girls don't really ask boys for pictures of their genitals or body parts. Boys are more typically asking for pictures, and girls are more typically sending it. That's not to say that some boys don't take pictures of themselves and send it on to girls, but the vast majority of sexting photos that we're talking about are of girls.
Girls. And it's usually a request done by boys and girls.
Generally, but girls have and do send it without being asked. And when I was talking to a private school recently to some 8th grade boys, they complained that they felt like boys were taking the rap for sexting when sometimes they get photos unsolicited from girls. So I know that does happen, but I think truly in the majority of cases, the boy is asking for a picture and the girls send it.
You think it has anything to do with boys being more in a hormonal stage at this point in their life? They're young teenagers, and there's maybe some natural inclination to have sensations or impulses.
Oh, of course it is. Sure. I mean, this is not the first time that kids have done something to learn more about sex or participate in that process. It's as old as time. I mean, it just used to be that kids might come across a Playboy magazine, and that would be their source of information, or they'd tear out a picture and show it to other people. Now it's digital, and so it's far easier to access. Porn is so easy to access, and when boys are sent these pictures, one of the mistakes they then make is to keep it on their phone, and that means that they are storing child pornography. And then if they send it on, they're guilty at another level
of distributing child pornography.
Distributing it, yes.
And there's been a recent change in laws that this is actually now a criminal. It's actually a criminal offense.
Well, it's always been a criminal offense, underage child pornography. But in 2016, Texas passed a law to change our consequence from being a felony for sexting to be a misdemeanor, knowing that it's children who so often are participating in this and not wanting to have to impose the harsh penalties on them that an adult would appropriately have if they were engaging in pornography with children. So that Texas is only one of 20 states that has done that. In other states, it is a felony, and you can not only have jail time, prison time, but be put on a lifetime offender list.
Oh my gosh, that's a major pitfall for these kids to really encounter, and a lot of them probably don't even know that.
Oh, they have no idea.
And is anybody really asking the questions like, what would happen if I did do this?
Not until they learn that that's a possibility. Then they're asking a lot of questions.
And then they're in trouble. And then what's going to happen?
That's
and they start discovering what's to come down the pike.
Absolutely. At a private school that I recently spoke to in their middle school, 70% of the kids thought no one in their class had sexted. I mean, they were very naive about that, and a large majority of them didn't even realize that there were laws against
Oh my
that.
gosh. Yeah, that's terrifying.
Mm-hmm. It's scary what kids
major.
Don't know.
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
And parents as well, because I as a parent, honestly, I didn't know any of this until I started reading more about this topic.
And well, here's the sad thing. I do a lot of educational talks in the area of counseling, and generally when I do that, I will sit down and Google what's happening and see what I can find out from the larger population. When I Google bullying or other anxiety or depression or other topics that I talk about, I get a lot of good, clinical insights. When I Googled sexting, I got a lot of how-tos. Oh. That's what comes up. 50 sample sexting ideas you can use right now. 87 examples to turn a guy on by text. 25 spicy texts to send that will get him horny.
Oh, my gosh.
This is what you get when you Google sexting. So it's
an instruction manual.
An instruction manual.
And essentially these kids that don't know and maybe want to send a message of interest.
Right.
Well, what can I do? And let me get some ideas. And they may run across information like this.
Exactly. When I did a survey at one of the schools, one of the private schools, asking kids why they do it, the number one reason that they cited was that kids are curious. The number two reason was that they think it's fun and flirty. The third reason was it makes guys or girls like you more, and that statistic, it was shared by the third position of kids feel pressure and insecure. The fourth reason was that you can find out if others think you're hot. And so kids are engaging in this behavior for the reasons that kids have always engaged in this behavior, to kind of check their status with others, to do something they think will help them to be more popular, to be viewed as hot.
And the scary thing is that they're already using these platforms, so it's just an addendum of what they already know how to do.
Oh, that's absolutely right. It's all the social media platforms that kids use. And in our survey of children at one of the private schools, 61% of the kids in middle school owned a cell phone, 36% owned both a cell phone and an iPad, and only 2% of kids own neither. So kids already have the tool in their hand to be able to engage in this behavior, and it's through the social media platforms. So if you have Facebook, or if you have Instagram, or if you have Snapchat or Tinder, or some of these social media platforms, then you have a built-in way to start engaging in sexting.
Yeah, and in a variety of ways. So it's not just in one platform, but there's several.
Oh, that's right. In fact, there's an app called Kick, which you may be aware of, that is actually pretty synonymous with sexting. When somebody says, "Do you want to kick?" it means, "Do you want to have sex, or do you want to sext?"
Oh my gosh! So there's actually code
yes.
word language.
Oh, there's always been teen secret language that we don't understand.
So now we need a new dictionary to even keep up.
Yeah,
and there is actually such thing as an urban dictionary that's actually floating around. We're going to take a quick break. We're visiting with Dr. Istre on sexting, and more from her as soon as we come back.
You're listening to the Therapy Hour with Rusty Lozano, brought to you by the Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy in Addison, Texas.
Hello, we are back from the break. If you're just joining us, we are visiting with Dr. Istre from the Center for Social Success in Dallas, Texas, and we're discussing the topic of sexting, especially among our kids, and that's what we've been talking about. And it's sad. I mean, it's hard and it's sad. It's a natural thing that there's curiosity in relationships, but how they're going about it is very difficult. And really difficult to hear and see them trying to maneuver through without some inside information. So before the break, we were actually talking about a pretty good description of sexting, and what I would like to get into with this segment, Dr. Istre, is how prevalent sexting is.
Sure. Well, we know it's happening more and more, but the statistics that you see will vary depending upon the age of the child or teen that was focused on and how the study was done. One of the best studies that I've seen recently was from the Cyberbullying Research Center in 2017, this year, and they broke down sexting by gender and age. So they have from 12 to 17 years old, how the percentages increase. And for 12-year-old boys, about 6% are thought to sex. For 13-year-olds, 9%. For 14-year-olds, 11%. 15-year-olds, 14%. 16-year-olds, 15%. And 17-year-olds, 19%. So you see it's going up every year. It starts at about 6% in sixth grade, and then by the time you're a junior in high school, it's up to almost 20%. the statistics for girls are even a little higher than that. They start out at 9% instead of 6% at 12 years old, and they go up to 26%, according to this study. Another interesting thing was the Drexel University study that was done a couple years ago, and they identified that 54% of kids participated in sexting in high school, and that was by asking college students retrospectively, did you do this? So there wasn't any concern about something that you did when you were a younger kid. Whereas, you can ask a younger kid now and they might say no, but not be telling the truth. So I think that asking college kids to look back on their time as teenagers might even be a more accurate way to approach that. And over half of the kids said
that's
that
staggering. I mean, that's
did this.
And this is something they're looking back on. And how could you get those statistics on something that's occurring now? Who's gonna admit it?
Right.
First of all, you may be afraid of getting in trouble.
Exactly.
And then, okay, well then, what if there are repercussions? Or what if I do have a collection of these pictures, and if I say anything, okay, they're going to start snooping on my phone, and I'll lose this collection. So there's a lot of things that I think that are in the way of getting accurate information now, but what we're learning from is what happens, the aftermath of what happens when somebody does get in trouble and you hear about it. And I even know of personal cases, my wife she's had a patient in the past that's had, really extenuous circumstances to the point that, it was really severe. The FBI was involved and that was several years ago, but very, 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 very difficult to deal with. Yes.
Yes. Well, when you start talking about the FBI involvement, it's generally related to a predator. That generally is when someone over 18 or over is sharing pictures, or for a predator, potentially even grooming a child or teen to meet them somewhere or to send more pictures. And that's a really scary thought that kids are talking to people online that they don't know who they are. A girl might think this is a 16-year-old boy that's telling her how beautiful she is and how he wants to meet her, and it's really a 60-year-old pedophile.
Yeah, and that terminology I think is called catfishing.
Yes,
where they make a fake profile and
right.
And they're very suave, and because obviously it's an adult, and there are some things that they're saying that might be a little bit more detailed, and they know how to hook emotions, and that's a scary dilemma.
It is a scary dilemma, and we've long known that predators groom their targets, their victims, and they take time to develop the relationship. They don't rush it, but they start gaining confidence and trust of the child or teen, until they're willing to meet them somewhere or send more pictures. And that's where blackmail can come in. And the new term for that is sextortion, extorting sexual pictures or sexting pictures. And there have been some very sad examples of girls that have gotten involved in that and become so depressed that they were suicidal or did, in fact, commit suicide.
Oh, that's something I have heard a lot about, is how this it spreads, and what do I do about it? And there's desperation.
Correct.
And the effects of it, the aftermath is, how can you clean it up? Now, if it were a note circulating around and then you had the note in your hand and discarded it, it'd be one thing. You're talking about cyberspace. This stuff is floating around, and there's really no way to get rid of it. I've heard of a case where there was some negative information about a family's child, and they wanted it erased. They wanted it qualsed from the internet, and it was going to cost them tens of thousands of dollars.
Or if you could even do it at all.
If you can even do it at all, because it would actually require that person on that end to agree to let it go.
Yes. Well, it's public and it's permanent, and that's those are two things that kids need to understand before they make the decision to sext. Is where it might go, how far it might go. Unfortunately, again, kids are naive, and girls who send a picture perhaps to their boyfriend don't think it will ever go farther than that. They trust the boy, and they think they're in love, and they send a picture, and then they break up. And what happens after that? If it was a bad breakup, if there's another girl involved, sometimes they can take that picture and send it far and wide. Some of the horrible stories I've heard about were one instance where there was a bad breakup, and the new girlfriend took the picture, had copies of it made at Kinko's, and taped it all over her brother's car.
Oh, my gosh.
There have been other examples where people send these images to a girl's pastor, to her mom and dad, to a prospective college, to a sports coach. There are any number of ways to embarrass and humiliate, and that takes this to an entirely different level. That is really sexual harassment or cyberbullying, as we've discussed.
And this even reaches not even the common house, not only the common household, but you hear about this happening in Hollywood as well.
Oh yes,
the Paris Hilton tapes that came out over a decade ago, and that is a mega family that has. I'm sure they wouldn't want to see their child exploited that way in the name.
Absolutely.
But that's something that affects a lot of people. And you think that at the moment it's harmless. Well, it's my partner, and it'll be just for us. But
yes.
you can never tell.
No, you can't. And you can't stop somebody from disseminating a picture that they find or obtain. Now, when it's done between consenting adults, it's not illegal. Sexting isn't illegal. But one of the catches with teens is that adulthood is marked at the age of 18. So you can have a senior who's 18 years old and potentially sexting with a junior or a sophomore who's younger, and that 18-year-old male could be tried as an adult.
Even though they go to the same school
Correct.
And they eat in the same cafeteria,
Exactly.
but it's that age margin that separates a child from an adult.
Exactly.
And how
the
could
penalties
you
are much harsher, as we talked
and how
about
could you
earlier.
possibly even think that would be? How could you predict something like that? How could you predict that something so extreme could happen?
Well, I think kids can't. Their brains are too immature, and they certainly don't think it's going to ever happen to them.
Well, how involved do you think parents should be in something like this? When it comes, let's take the example of an older boyfriend or girlfriend dating a younger child. How should they approach their children about the do's and don'ts on things like sexting?
Well, that probably is, would be handled on an individual basis, but I think that boys need to understand when they turn 18 that there is a difference, that they will be treated differently, that they are now an adult in the eyes of the law. And so they have to be careful about what they do. I think there's some leeway that the legal system affords boyfriends and girlfriends who are a year apart, an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old, or where they aren't subject to as harsh a penalty when it's reciprocal. But that varies, and I think that you have to err on the side of caution.
And I think careful. That. Well, I mean, thinking of my own children, because that's what I do a lot when I do these shows, that I would want to actually tell my son or my daughter, hey, this is what can happen. And even though it's not even on your radar, it's not something that you're concerned about and you're even thinking about. If you come across a picture or somebody sends you a picture and they're older than you or you're older than them, that you can actually get in a lot of trouble for that. Even though you didn't mean to, you didn't ask for it, that's still child pornography. So we have to be able to educate our kids and have the conversation. Be bold enough to as a parent to say something to our kids that these are the warnings, these are the pitfalls, this is what can really happen to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Rusty. And I mean, the consequences are serious. It's not just the legal consequences. It's not it being a misdemeanor or certainly it could be bumped up to a felony if sexual harassment was involved. But the social and emotional consequences are so great. There have been many a girl, as we talked about, that where this has happened to, and have become so overwhelmed that they took their life as a result of that. That it was so impossible to see a way out of. And And these pictures can follow kids from one school to the next, even if they move. Kids are cruel, and they will call girls a slut or a whore. And unfortunately, boys are more often celebrated when they have
like they're the stud.
Absolutely.
And the girl is the slut.
Absolutely. It's the double standard. It's alive and well.
It's actually very scary.
Yeah.
We're visiting with Dr. Istre. We're discussing sexting. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll hear more from Dr. Istre when we come back after these messages.
13 minutes goes by so quick.
You're listening to the Therapy Hour with Rusty Lozano, brought to you by the Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy in Addison, Texas.
Hello, we are back. If you're just joining us, we're visiting with Dr. Istre from the Center for Social Success in Dallas, dristre.com, and our topic today is sexting. And before the break, we actually started to get into the social and emotional ramifications of sexting. And you had mentioned not only the legal aspects of this, but emotionally how it can affect somebody. And you started to discuss things like suicide, self-harm. Let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. It certainly has a devastating impact on the person whose picture has gone viral. And that's what we're really talking about, is when an image is distributed widely and it's impossible to get back, and everybody seems to know about it. The social and emotional impact is not even just on the girl or the boy that are involved specifically, but on their family, on their friends. They can be outcast. They can have consequences at school, where they can be taken off teams. When they apply to colleges look at their online profile, and if anything like this comes up, they can be denied access to college. They can lose scholarships.
And that really does happen.
Yes, it does.
You remember the white supremacist marches that they had a few months ago, and how they were actually hunting down these people, and they were getting fired from their jobs, and they found them on social media, and they found their faces, facial recognition. So the actions you take it really can have long-lasting effects.
Long-term effects. And kids are notorious for not thinking about the future, for living very much in the here and now, and for thinking things like that will never happen to them.
That's it.
The
immortality of being a teen.
Yes, of course. And,
we
can talk about legal consequences, but it's illegal to drink underage. It's illegal to smoke marijuana. And
right.
How many kids still do that?
Oh, it's taboo. I mean, it's like you show up with beer at a party in high school, and you're like, whoa, look at how cool that guy is.
Absolutely.
And, and so you're told not to do something, and I think the natural inclination, chaos theory, is to go and seek it out and see what happens.
Yes.
Take those risks.
And that's exactly right. So, but I think it hits home more to kids to think about their reputation and the impact on their families, or on something they're currently interested in, a sport that they're striving to get a scholarship in. Those things are more here and now.
Right.
And I think when they learn about the wide spread impact this can have, it is more of a deterrent to them.
Absolutely. I was talking to my son and I went out to a ranch. We have a ranch out in Knickerbocker. You know this. And I was talking to the landowner, and right now the bucks are in rut. There's one time a year that deer go into a reproductive state, and the male buck metamorphosizes. He has so much hormones. He has these little, on the inside of their hocks, on the knees, they have these little black pads, and they secrete hormones like pheromones. Their muscles increase in their neck 3 times the size. And usually you can't get close to a deer. You can't get close to these animals, and you can see pictures of them on a game camera. But this is the one time of year where they're so love-struck and there's so much going on that he was saying that he went out to go rake some leaves, and this doe came right up to him like a dog. And then all of a sudden, the buck came up to him and within arm's distance, and they were using him and running around. And so there were all these things happening in the buck's body that was making them not even afraid of the presence of a person. And I'm wondering how, with kids, this hormonal change that happens in their body, and the accessibility of how this phone and the internet can bring things to them, how much they really don't think about this because they're in such a hormonal charge that they're striving towards an impulse.
Sure. Well, we're all mammals, aren't we?
Yeah.
Animals and humans alike. And
right.
Certainly there's a strong sexual drive, and we know teens are just coming of age with hormones. And I think that's why for a long time we've known that getting young males to engage in sports or other activities where they can dissipate some of that energy and drive is a good thing. And the same is true, for girls as well. But yes, I think kids are naturally drawn and curious about sex, and there's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with it.
It's just that the way they're doing it is can have devastating consequences, and that's what we as adults want to protect them from, are these lifelong severe consequences that an act like sending a nude picture
it
can
takes
have.
just one thoughtless text or one thoughtless request or one thoughtless action, and you can't take it back.
That's right.
That's scary. I mean, and I think that when I'm thinking about my own kids, that I think it's important that we try to really educate our kids. We need to get in there and really talk about these things. Talk about the emotional consequences. Talk about how this can really affect their lives. And I keep going back to that because the suicide rates, the mistakes, and you deal with the consequences after the fact, right?
Yes.
And I think that's something that's no way to learn. That's the school of hard knocks, right? So this is really a topic that has to be pounded into your children. Would you say?
Well, I don't know about pounded, just because I think they would react to that in a negative way.
And they would eek and gross and why are we discussing this?
Yeah.
But we really do have to have that conversation.
Well, we do have to have that conversation. You're right about that. And we have to have it in a way that we're not overly emotional and we're not overly judgmental, so that kids will talk. Otherwise, they're going to shut down if they perceive that you're going to react negatively or get very upset, or like you said earlier, maybe ground them or take things away. They're not going to talk to us about what's going on. So in order to leave that door open, we have to present them with information in a very factual way that's non-judgmental and help them to arrive at those conclusions without us having to pound it into them, that they come to that conclusion
and
themselves.
how much information is too much information?
Well, that's a great question. With sex ed, we have always said only answer the question that they ask.
Right,
you don't have to have the whole birds and bees talk when a child asks you one specific question. But I think with sexting, we do need to talk about the consequences. We need to outline the legal, social, emotional, education and career, the cyberbullying potential, online predator potential. That's just part of the educational process.
And it's pretty vast.
Yes.
And I think that looking at this, pornography really does play a big part in this.
Oh, that's the
sexualization of our entire industry, the entire sex industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they have billions and billions of dollars at stake, and it's easy for them. I was having a conversation the other day, and I think even you and I were talking about this earlier. It's such a passive industry because they have these little robots that will go and feed into a video game link that you're online with, or it'll flash across your screen if you're just, checking out your social media. Or if you're playing these little online games, how they have advertisement breaks, they'll sneak something into that.
Absolutely.
And
kids, even if they don't seek out porn, about once a month will just accidentally come across it through no intention of their own. Porn has really become a part of the mainstream popular culture, and it's now, like you said, $1 billion industry. It's $10 to $14 billion a year, and that exceeds professional football, baseball, and basketball combined.
Oh, wow.
One of the other things that I think is particularly interesting is that in the spring of 2016, Playboy stopped publishing its nude photos because they could no longer compete with the net.
Wow.
That the statement from one of their CEOs was, "You're now one click away from every sex act imaginable." So a centerfold can no longer compete.
They can't compete with like a paper copy that you have to be old enough to buy behind the counter at a 7-Eleven. And
one
there's
click away.
Yeah, and there's no police on this. There's no way to monitor that.
And part of the scarier part of porn is that porn is becoming increasingly aggressive and hardcore. And there's a lot of violence and rape and humiliation involved in porn. So what are kids learning from this? There has one of leading psychologists, Dr. Philip Zimbardo, did a TED Talk about how young men's brains are being digitally rewired due to excessive porn viewing and video gaming. And this just makes maintaining real-life relationships extremely hard and not helping our kids to navigate that whole notion of committed relationships when they see porn and it's highly stimulating and variable and increasingly aggressive and hardcore. Then, regular relationships seem kind of boring.
And what do? Like, okay, here we are, and let's say that it's a little boy and a little girl, and I like you, and okay, what am I supposed to do now? And so the only point of reference, if a child has been exposed to these things, would be to kind of start maybe moving in the direction of carrying out some of these acts that they've seen.
Yeah. And other research out of Cambridge University has shown that males who frequently masturbate and are addicted to porn have a higher rate of erectile dysfunction. That's a new thing in our society. What happens is it changes the reward center of the brain. It's kind of like a drug addict. You need ever more stimulation to get the same rush and quiet the craving. So boys and men can become so used to seeing this graphic sex laced with aggression and sadomasochism that normal sex no longer excites them. And a little blue pill won't help that.
Right.
That's changing the dopamine levels in our brain to this highly exciting, changeable graphic mode that is required in order to get that high. So I think that certainly is an important thing for teenage boys to understand, is that there are truly negative side effects to porn viewing, and porn addiction is becoming increasingly prevalent in our society because it is so easy and it's so exciting. Even our video games are, like you said, can be laced with so much porn. Boys can hire a prostitute in some of the games. The girls are scantily clothed, and there's a lot of cleavage being shown. It permeates our culture, so it makes kids think that this is what they should be doing.
Absolutely.
That this is normal.
Yeah, and it's a very passive approach. You're not even looking for it, and it sneaks in. We're visiting with Dr. Istre. We're discussing sexting. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll hear more from Dr. Istre on our last segment, and then we will go into podcast mode. We'll be back right after these messages.
So we're going to talk about what parents can do and
You're listening to the Therapy Hour with Rusty Lozano, brought to you by the Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy in Addison, Texas.
Hi, and welcome back to the show. If you're just joining us, we're visiting with Dr. Susan Istre from the Center for Social Success in Dallas, Texas. DrIstre.com, I-S-T-R-E. Like history without the H. That's how my wife was. So before we left on the break, we actually started to really get into how the pornography industry has an effect on it can actually sneak into our lives. It can sneak into these kids' lives just playing a simple video game and what we're up against. So what do we as parents what can we do about this? What is it that we can actually say? What are the steps that we can take? And let's see what Dr. Istre has to say about this.
Well, I think you're right when you talk about how insidious porn is in our culture. And we haven't even mentioned song lyrics and TV ads and magazines and pop stars. Our whole culture has become sexualized. So I know that parents often feel overwhelmed with this. How do you stand up to such widespread influences on your kids? And I certainly, you got to talk to your family about your moral values and beliefs, but we all know that you can't just lecture that. You have to live it. You have to model that behavior. You have to be able, like you said earlier, not to shy away from tough topics, to talk about sexuality and pornography and peer pressure. But parents also have to get involved with monitoring their kids, reviewing games before they buy them, monitoring their cell phone use and their computer use, because kids are not mature enough to do that for themselves. And left alone, they'd be on the screen 24/7.
Right. And just like they would choose to have candy for dinner. Yeah. And you don't leave it up to a child. You know, a mom made the comment the other day that even the Star Wars series have just become so dark, and how there's so much, like the escalation of dark material, how, you know, there's horror and violence, and there's no real sexual acts in Star Wars, but I mean, there's a lot of things that are out there on television, movies that we see that really portray this, and so even that is an exploitation.
Well, sure, and look at what's happening today in this day and age with all of the sexual harassment claims against powerful men in Hollywood and in the media. I think that we are finally at the point where the pendulum has swung so far that people are saying enough is enough. And women are speaking out, sometimes after 20 years of silence. But there's power in numbers, and we're finding out that there's been a tremendous amount of abuse of power and sexual encroachment and sexual harassment. And so it points out to me the need to teach our boys to become better men.
Absolutely.
To help them to not only know how to respect women, but to form meaningful relationships, and for girls not to objectify themselves, not to buy in to what the culture is selling about, the way you dress, the way you think, the way you have to, have sex with.
Right. Yeah. The expectation.
Yes.
The trend these days are that there was a point when I was growing up that boys were chasing the girls, and that's like historically how it's been. But now, these days, it's equal. It's a two-way street, that there are females that that pursue boys just as much as they do, boys chasing girls. So yeah, I mean, what changed there, and how can we what can we do to really rectify this?
Kids have to think well enough of themselves not to believe that they're only important because of a body part or a sexual function. And so that starts real early. Self-esteem and valuing kids and encouraging them to find something they're good at, find a passion, and find something to be involved in. I think that's a good counterweight to this only viewing yourself in very narrow terms. But it's still tough when you see these models that are anorexic and skimpy clothing, and everything that you see on TV and in magazines implies that sex is the driving force in relationships.
And buy this perfume, and this is the way you're supposed to act on a beach. And you're all sprawled out. So, yes, absolutely. Did you ever watch that movie, Men in Black 2? Mm-hmm. When this snake-like, creature invades Earth, and he was taking a human form, and it took the form of like this half clanky naked model, and he goes, yeah, this species is just, they're turned on by mammary glands, and so that's that's the form that it chose. But it's kind of true. I mean, it's like there's so much of an emphasis on body parts.
Yes.
That young girls need to learn to develop their personalities. They need to learn that in every stage of their life start to really build and work on interpersonal skills.
Certainly, boys and girls alike.
You know, I recall this one case where there was a boy, and he was kind of courting a girl, and he asked her through text, "Will you go with me?" Which is like asking her to be, exclusive with him. And he had this amazing personality on text. But then whenever he'd get close to her, he would just say hi and just kind of walk next to her, and they wouldn't really say anything, and just kind of like walk beside each other. And then they'd say, "Okay, have a good day, see ya." And then they'd leave, and then here comes the text swarming in with like the emojis and "Oh yeah, you look so great," and saying all these things that he really should have been practicing saying, like to enter in her presence.
Yes.
And I think really empowering these kids to be able to, start using more vocalization. Hey, how are you? You having a nice day? And just basic conversation could really start a trend, a rift, and helping them to know that what you're dealing with is not a pretty girl with pretty hair with body parts or a masculine boy with muscles, but you're dealing with an interesting person they're funny and they have likes and dislikes, and it's something I think we really need to spend more time teaching our kids and getting back to some of those basics.
Well, absolutely. And you're talking about social skills. And we really have seen a decline in social skills with the advent of cell phones and texting and emailing. It's so curious to me to see a group of teenagers who are together, but all looking at their screen, their phones, and not interacting with each other, much like what you just described. It's almost like toddler parallel play. They're engaged in their own world. They're together, and they're doing similar things, but they're not interacting.
They're not interacting. You can't pick up on the nuances of facial gestures,
correct?
Maintaining eye contact, reading body language. So there is an art to that.
Missing all of
that.
And they're also misinterpreting cues. You sometimes you don't know what a person means by a text, or you might misinterpret it and think they mean something that they don't.
Yeah, or the text comes out in a way that seems like cold, off-putting, and not interested, when in actuality it is. And is that why they developed the emojis? Now, the new iPhone has like the poop emoji that will follow your face, and it'll smile and stick its tongue out, so you can animate it. But why aren't we spending more time actually just doing that one-on-one?
We absolutely need to, because otherwise, we leave kids to their own resources. How to connect with each other. They're doing what they see on TV, or they're doing what they see in the pornography industry, or everybody's doing it. So we're not counteracting that. It's very hard when you're dealing with behavior issues. You can't just tell a kid what not to do. You have to tell them what to do. And I think that's what you're saying, is we need to, if we're going to tell them not to sex, then what should they be doing?
Exactly.
Instead of
replace it with something that they should do.
It's more healthy.
And in a direction they can go in and start to explore. And the other thing that's missing from this element, and if a child is in a relationship, is that there's a whole mystery of the other person. What is this person like? That's the love factor. The days that you spend around like on cloud nine thinking about this person that you're starting to date, and I wonder what they're doing. I wonder what they're like in this situation. That's love. And that's the excitement of getting to know somebody.
Yes.
So when you cut corners and you go directly into physical interaction, I mean, it's disconnected. I mean, it seems like it'd be really cold, disconnected, and impersonal.
Absolutely.
And sad, sad and really meaningless.
Well, it's sad, and you look at our society as a whole, that 1 in every 2 marriages ends in divorce. So we're not doing a very good job at all of helping people to know how to choose a spouse and form a relationship and make a commitment and resolve problems and stay in the relationship. This is kind of a throwaway world. If it doesn't go exactly like you think it should, then get a divorce or don't get married at all. And I think it's really threatening the institution of marriage. Kids are losing faith that it is something that is possible.
And unimportant. It's threatening. I think it's threatening us as a species. It's our humanity. And it's that one terminology. It's that one thing that was said on a movie called Powder, when the guy says, "Is our technology surpassing our humanity?" Mm-hmm. When our humanity should be surpassing our technology. And it's true. Mm-hmm. It's true, because we're missing something here. We need to get back to some basics.
Yeah.
We need to get back to the social skills, I think, starting at an early age.
Absolutely.
The hellos, how are you? The hey, would you like to play? And just the simple interactions, the nuances that develop.
And kids won't do that if they're glued to their phones 24/7. It won't happen. So parents have to limit phone and computer use, and they have to require that a kid or a teen be involved with the family, be involved in outside activities, get enough sleep, take care of themselves in other ways than this obsession with their screens.
Absolutely. I think that being said is a good point for us to actually start with our podcast after this series. We have about a minute and 20 seconds left. I do want to spend some time talking about your center. And how can people find you?
Well, the Center for Social Success has been around for a lot of years, about 20 years, and I am the director of that center, but I employ 8 or 9 therapists, and they're all specialists in different areas. So if someone is interested in getting help for their young child, we have therapists that are specialized in play therapy. If they have middle-aged or teen children, or if they need help maritally or with behavior management, with dealing with some of these tough issues, we do have specialists in all those areas. So if they'd like to learn more about us, certainly look us up at www.dristre.com, and I think they'll see the variety of services that we have to offer.
And also, if there's a private institution, schools, private schools, churches that would like to hear more about this topic of sexting, and even getting into some instructionals with teachers and the students, you bring in your crew of counselors, and you educate the staff and the children. You talk to them. So that in itself is starting a rift, and it's very hopeful.
Yeah,
Dr. Istre, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. If you have any questions or you'd like to hear more information, please visit our website or follow us on Twitter at the Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy. The iHeartRadio, Talk Radio 1190, the Therapy Hour with Rusty Lozano, and our Facebook. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Listening to the Therapy Hour with Rusty Lozano, brought to you by the Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy in Addison, Texas.
Hi, this is Rusty Lozano, and this is our podcast segment with Dr. Susan Istre on the topic of sexting. This is where we actually get into a little more conversational topics on this particular subject, or topics on. I'm sorry, let me go back. A little bit more conversational about our topic. No time constraints, and really just free flowing conversation, because there's a lot that I wanted to say, and it really was starting to fire me up on the idea that we do need to spend more time training our kids and having conversations with them. It's no longer just the norm to have a great household. Great job, picture perfect house with white picket fences. You could have all the right stuff on the inside and just the most amazing household, but it's what they're exposed to. And I think of the Longcar, Brian Longcar, that had he recently lost his daughter, and then he himself had a heart attack, and you think about how picture perfect their life must have been, or you would hope they was, seemingly, right? But then there's always something on the inside. And what do you think? Do you think that how much time should a parent spend with their kids talking, just discussing life matters? And is that a good thing to get into?
Well, I think that needs to happen every day, with every opportunity to interact. I mean, sometimes the best opportunity is in the car on the way to school or coming home, when you're not making eye contact with your kids, but you're just able to have a conversation with them. Or it might be while you're watching TV and you see something really upsetting or startling happen, and talking about that. Gosh, what did you think about that? Or how would you handle that situation?
Yeah.
And I think parents often miss opportunities, and then they think it's too late, but it's not. You can always go back and say, remember when you saw this or said this or did this? I was just thinking about that, and can I talk to you some more?
Yeah.
Just make the opportunity to interact with your kids, and do it frequently.
Yeah, and don't let the eye rolls and don't let that deter you. as like, what did I do? Or what's going on here? The children are going to have that face, and they may roll their eyes, but they are listening.
They are listening. But I do think we have to pay attention to what are teachable moments. And a teachable moment for a kid is when they are interested in learning. It's not when we are interested in lecturing. That's why if you can incorporate talking to the kids throughout the day rather than making it a lesson that you want to pound into them,
right.
It might be, more likely that they would be receptive to it. And perhaps when they start eye rolling and shaking their knee or looking around, you need to pick up on those nonverbal cues that moment has passed. That doesn't mean you won't have many other opportunities,
right.
But
right.
At that time, your child is checked out.
Yeah, and to really continue to keep the lines of communication open.
And open.
Is it ever really too late to start something like that if parents aren't doing something like that?
I don't think so. I mean, people can change at any point in their lives. They can change their opinion about people or their relationships, but it takes a concerted effort. And once an opinion is set, it does take quite a lot of experience to view it differently, because people will start putting a person or their attitudes in a cubby and not letting them out of that. So
right.
I think you have to be committed. You have to expect that change doesn't happen overnight, but that you keep inviting, you keep opening the door, and you keep inviting.
I was talking to a mom, and she has 3 daughters, and she said that what she likes to do, because I asked her, do you ever have conversations with your kids, at night about, or anytime about things going on? She goes, all the time. Her routine is that she goes like right before they go to bed. They're captive. They can't escape. Mm-hmm. They're laying down. Mm-hmm. All the lights are turned off. The room is dark. And what she says happens is they're just voices in a dark room, and it's easier. It seems like it makes it easier for a child to have a dialogue with the parent.
Not so many distractions.
Not so many distractions. Not so many awkward looks. They don't have to look at my parent in my eye when they're saying things. And I thought that was pretty clever, that she actually she's found a way to have this time with each child at night and have conversations with them. Easy, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, wherever you can find those moments, you have to create them.
Yeah. And the idea of just the dark room is actually really good, because it can be overwhelming. Kids in counseling, sitting one-on-one with a counselor can be overwhelming sometimes. And I'm supposed to talk about what? And be open about it. How are you going to like me? Those counseling kind of nuances that happen, that the discomfort of being able to express what's happening.
But I think one of the reasons that counselors can be more effective than parents is because they are able to remain non-judgmental. They don't take the child's behavior personally. And that's what parents do. They get their feelings hurt. They get angry with the child for their behavior. They react with shock or disdain, and that will just shut their kid down immediately.
Right. Yeah. Because and they may not even want to say anything because I don't want to upset my parent.
Right.
So
and counselors have learned not to react with a shocked facial expression, and to encourage the kid to continue to talk about the issue, not to cut them off, not to lecture to them. And so that's why they can be more effective. And I think parents can learn some of those techniques as well.
What's the difference between lecturing and conversation?
Well, lecturing is you're doing all the talking. A conversation is a two-way street.
Yeah. So you're asking questions.
Absolutely. And listening. Active listening is one of the things that the social skills that I think we not only need to teach kids, but parents alike. And that just means looking at the person, giving them your full attention, nodding your head, agreeing, smiling, responding to what they say, not changing the conversation to where you want it to go.
Responding to what they're saying is keyword, not just going through the motions, and then when it's your time to talk, then you come out with another point.
Well, you see, and that's how we function in play therapy. We follow the child, and even in some of the one of the approaches we call child-directed therapy, and a parent is taught not to lead the dance, but to follow, and not to bring up new topics, but to listen and expand upon what the child wants to talk about. So there truly is an art and a science listening and to deepening and developing relationships. And I think we don't do a good enough job of helping parents to understand how to do that.
Because the kids is labeling it themselves. They're describing it in their own terminologies, and you're not there to correct them, but you're there to just let the information flow.
Well, the first thing you have to do is understand them.
Mm-hmm.
Where are they coming from, and what's important to them, and how can you connect with them on their level so that they'll be more willing to connect with you on your level?
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, I read a book. It was on Adlerian play therapy. And one of the things that this author had mentioned is that when, every child has their own personality sucked in the household. So, one child has these characteristics, what their personality is like. One child has these characteristics, what their personality is like. Oh, this one is like this. This one won't like this one would like this, because you base it off of how they are. But what she says is when you treat your child that way, and with regards to helping them develop and problem solve, when you treat your child that way, then you're doomed to keep them where they are and not allowing them to have an opportunity to expand and develop into a new person, or expand their skills.
Yeah, it makes me think about how what we as parents focus on so often is what our children are doing wrong. And by focusing on that, we are reinforcing that behavior. We're talking about it. That's the last thing that they think about, the no, don't stop, and quit. How many times do I have to tell you sort of statements that we make? And we're not helping them. We're not catching them at the times when they're doing something different, when they're more positive, when there's something that we could take and encourage and build upon. So it's really backwards.
Because that's not really parenting. It's just to tell them, no, don't quit, stop, and just putting bumpers around the behaviors that you don't want, but give them guidance and some direction on the things that they have choices on, and maybe explore. Maybe if you tried it this way, maybe if reframe it. Don't talk to your mom that way. She's your mom. She's a lady. Why don't you ask her this way? Yes, ma'am. Use your manners. And really spend the time to correct them at that moment.
Well, and you're talking about role modeling too, and I think when parents make those kind of statements, they need to be sure that that's what they're doing, that they're not talking disrespectful to their spouse,
right.
or doing exactly what they're telling their kids not to. But you could even take that a step further. Instead of telling them what to do, ask them, what could you do differently? How could you say that
and
in a more polite way?
What if the child doesn't know?
Then I think you have to say, would you like some ideas? You could do A, B, C, or D. But again, we have to present them with choices. As long as we come down in a very dogmatic way, telling them what to do, they're more likely to react against us. It needs to be their idea. We can plant seeds, but they need to nurture that and be willing to grow it.
Absolutely. In the show, we talked about an example of, well, no, it actually wasn't even the show. It was during a break, how I had talked about how my son has a tendency to, when somebody doesn't respond to his text, this ruminated with me. Like he'll say, "Are you there? Answer me. Or what's going on? How come you're not answering me?" How can that what can we do differently? How can we show kids a different way of phone etiquette? And is there a phone etiquette that you're aware of?
Well, I think that kids are insecure and they're anxious, and they read in, like we said earlier, you don't have the nuances of facial expression or tone of voice or body posture to interpret what that means when they're not responding. But I think we have to teach our kids to be more patient, to set the phone down. When you're sitting there looking at the phone and waiting for a response and waiting for that little bubble to see that the person is thinking or writing a response to you, you become more anxious. It's the sole focus of your attention. And I think kids need to be able to give another person some space, give them some time to react.
And maybe try calling them and saying
hi,
right? That's how we used to do it.
Yeah.
Phone cord was stretched across the room and into the bathroom with the door closed. That was our chat lobby.
Yeah.
That was a long phone cord.
That's a long time ago.
I don't think it was ever supposed to be that long, but we actually made it that way. But I think it would be a good idea to spend some time talking to kids about a phone etiquette.
Yes.
And that's something that maybe somebody hasn't raised that question, but
sure.
What is the appropriate way to be? I think it seems like what you're saying is it should emulate what you would do in person.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But in person, you could see that somebody was busy or that somebody was asking them a question or that their mother asked them to do a chore. You would know why they aren't responding, or if they're just angry with you and they have an angry body posture and they're glaring at you, you'd know that they're not answering you on purpose.
Right. Yeah.
You don't have all those signs to interpret that behavior. I know in our clinic, many times kids respond so impulsively to a text and they say something that gets them in more and more trouble. So sometimes we will have kids in therapy bring their phones with them and they'll show us things that have been sent to them, and we will help them construct a response to that and think about it and
cool.
Wait to send the text and reread it and make sure that's really what they want to say. So I don't think anybody's ever taught kids any texting etiquette.
No, and it doesn't sound like it, but I really dig what you just said. That seems like it's you're giving them a skill set, a tool to use, how to construct a response, and really setting a tone with them on that.
Yes,
so they can follow it, and that needs to be more prevalent. That's something there's a definite demand for that. I could see, I'm thinking of my own kids again.
Yeah,
like
sure.
how these are conversations that are really interesting, because I think that's this can go so many ways. It's such a complicated topic that it can go from the sex aspect all the way to the core development of personality. Mm-hmm. It's so multifaceted.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even for kids when they're struggling with someone and maybe they're trying to clarify, are you mad at me, or why aren't you responding? That probably is a cue. Okay, I need to talk to them in person. This is more complicated. This is getting too cumbersome to go back and forth and would you, are you, will you? And they just need to have a conversation. Kids aren't comfortable with that. Just like you described the teenage boy that was so eloquent in text, and then when he was face to face with the girl, just was stiff and avoided eye contact.
Yes.
That's a whole different set of skills, those interpersonal skills.
And those are really under attack. You can't, there's a list of emojis. Have you seen how many different facial gestures in a cat form or a facial form or a little disco dancer? So many different options to express emotion. So the concept's there. We know it.
The concept is there. I think they're trying.
And we know it, but even the kids get really good at being able to use that. But then it's the courage to be able to express it.
Yeah. Or to know what the different rules are when you talk face-to-face as when you talk on the phone. It's even odd to me to hear a teenager say, OMG, when they're talking, when they're having a conversation.
LOL.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. They use their texting.
Yes. As a word now.
Right.
That's interesting. That's definitely a different era, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It really is.
But kids do need help, and I don't think we don't know how to do that as parents. We need to have more resources to talk to our kids and to think about how to help them be more successful in relations and emotionally. And maybe the parent's not comfortable with that.
And I think that's a big part of where this all starts, because some parents that I've run into are in the mindset of, no, you're going to give me your phone. I have access to your phone. Some parents are a little bit more passive, and I've seen kids just kind of mow over their parents, and they're a little bit more meek. So how do you address that with starting at the parental aspect as compared to the kids?
Well, you talked about two extremes, somebody that's passive and somebody that's really aggressive. It's probably somewhere in the middle that we need to fall. But I think ideally it's where you start the conversation when the child gets the phone and understands that you will be monitoring it, that this is not, you don't have carte blanche, that there are a lot of dangers, and that your parent will be looking at these things, or you can tell them that you're monitoring it, and you will expect them to give you their phone periodically to do checks and apps and stuff like that. I think when you try to have that conversation years later, after a kid has had their phone and had what they felt like was 100% privacy, it's a big battle.
Right.
Big battle. And kids see it as their phone, which, of course, it's not. We bought it. We pay for it. Yeah, absolutely. But they also think that parents don't trust them and they're spying on them. And, it seems to have gotten misconstrued. The reason parents want to look at a phone or an app, they're concerned about their kid. But if it comes across in a real authoritarian, punishing way, like you give that to me right now, then kids are going to object. But I think if parents can communicate their concerns and that of all the things that are out, the dangers that are out there, and that it's for they are doing this because they love the child or teen, not because they're trying to be it's
for your own safety,
drill sergeant.
Yeah, and you know what? And for the aggressive parent, kids will find another way.
Oh yeah, burner phones.
Yeah, yeah. What is that?
Well, it's just they'll get another account, or they'll get a throwaway phone. They'll use a friend's phone. They'll find other ways.
And they're so cheap right now. I mean, you can find them used. Yeah,
sure.
Not to give anybody any ideas, but they're cheap to obtain. They really are.
Yeah.
So, can a parent actually contact you guys and say, "Okay, I'm about to give my child a phone. I need help with parenting on this."
Sure.
Have you guys done that before?
We always talk to parents and give them advice about any kind of a privilege, and a phone is a privilege. Parents are constantly asking us, how long should my child be, how much screen time, should they have? And really the answer to that isn't cut and dry. The American Academy of Pediatrics used to say 1 to 2 hours of screen time, period. And that's really not so realistic in this day and age.
Yeah.
Our phones are no longer just vehicles to make a phone call or a text or an email. There are music. There are entertainment. There are alarms. There are way to Google
movies,
questions
games.
And answer. They're the way we purchase things. They're so integrated into our life. Technology is so integrated into our life that kids and adults alike are spending more time. Teens spend an average of 9 hours a day on their screens and media. Preteens spend 6 hours a day, and adults spend on average 4 hours a day. And the literature review that I have done seems to indicate that the questions to be asking are not how much time specifically are they spending on their phone, but are they engaged in their real life? Are they spending time with their family? Are they getting enough sleep? Are they doing outside activities? Are they interacting with their friends? I think if those questions are affirmative, they're probably not spending too much time on their phone. If they're not getting enough sleep because the phone's ringing at 2 a.m. in the morning, you clearly need to take that away and have the phones go in a special place at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or whatever time that might be.
Well, I could keep you here all day because the questions just keep coming. What about charging your phone? Should a child charge their phone in their room, and should they be allowed to keep their phone in the room to charge overnight, or should it be like in
ideally
a different place?
Just because it's too much of a temptation. And there have been other studies that have shown that sleep is disrupted so much. Every time your phone pings or the light goes on, or it interferes with sleep.
There are these automatic notices that will ping your phone
and
at 3
the
a.m.
automatic emails, that start pinging in. So no, ideally a kid would not, and you would not keep a phone in your room to charge, but to keep it in another place.
And to turn the volume off and no sounds, not disrupting the sleep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I could definitely see that.
And experts also talk about computer screens and not even having those in kids' rooms, that to keep that in a more public place in the house, so you can see if porn is being accessed. You can kind of monitor if they're really doing their homework, or if they're texting a friend.
And there are some things that are floating around out there that can give parents like inside information to their child's phone if they have their iTunes login information. And I think that's something that parents need to become more versed on. And these are applications. I think Disney sells one called The Circle, and then there's one that's called Teen Safe. And what you do is like you have your iTunes login information, the child's login information, and you can access anytime. You go to their website, access anytime where they've been, who they've talked to, and what sites they've visited.
Right.
I think that's
yes. There's one app called Pumpic, Pumpic, that is a good parental monitoring app, and it gives you access to a kid's mobile device, including text calls, app use, online browsing, etc., even their GPS location.
Wow.
And there's another one called Phone Sheriff. There's one called Mobile Spy. Really, those there are some good parental monitoring
so to
apps.
be able to kind of fight back.
Yeah.
If you do have a resistant child, but hopefully a lot of this is done and your communication is done with an agreement that, this is for your safety, for our safety, that I would like to have access to your phone, and these are the reasons why.
Right.
Yeah.
And a kid may not accept that, and they may have one account where all the things that they know it's okay for you to see are on, and another account that is more secret. So
little weasels.
We do
have to figure that stuff out.
We do have to be careful about that, and you have to answer the question for yourself. Do you think your child's phone is private? Do you think you have the right as a parent to overview and monitor? And people feel differently about that. But I think a parent's role is to make sure that their kids are safe and that they're making good choices, and to be aware of a potential harm before it is out of control.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just read an article today of a young girl that was from Houston, and she left. She goes, I'm moving to California. She had found some boy online, and she was on her way out there, and there was a suspicion that, this was a sex trafficking thing, and she was in Louisiana. And anyway, she ended up calling, and they got her back safe, but, she was en route to kind of go and pursue this boy she's never met, but apparently saying the right things and drawing her closer into whatever the plan was. So, on going back to the phone element, what if a child they're 16 and they say, okay, well, I have my own phone. I'm paying for my own bill. So now you don't have access to my phone. Like, you're not allowed to. It's mine. I'm paying for it.
Well, I think that you probably have access to the car. You probably have access to their their food and housing.
You want to play that way? Okay. Here's rent.
Really
here's your
adult?
share of electricity. Yeah. This is your shelf for food. Yeah.
They are not an adult. They are not an adult. And as long as they're under your care and protection, you do have a mandate.
So don't fall for it, folks. Don't fall for that. If they're paying for it, great. But I think that's a very good point. If you really want to show independence, okay, pay for half the bills, and this is what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Realistic.
But I think
that's a
what
little
that
set of
says
reality.
to me, too, is that there's a lot of conflict between that parent and child.
Yeah.
And so it's not just going to be tough love and strict rules. That requires more investigation into what this relationship is like and why is there so much anger and what's going on that really needs to be addressed as an underlying issue.
Right. And that's where I think it'd be a great idea for them to come in and seek therapy.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. That's your center.
Parents are so reluctant to ask for help with emotional matters and parenting matters. And yet, if their kid needed a tutor, they wouldn't think twice about hiring a math tutor or a tennis coach or a testing coach. But for some reason, there's still a stigma to ask for help with your family relationships. And unfortunately, it keeps people from coming in sometime. And I think if we could be more open about that and just know that it's just another avenue.
It's for emotional health.
Absolutely.
I mean, just like anything else, if you're going to improve your math scores, mathnasium, any of these things that you do, why not? I mean, if you have the picture-perfect household and you're feeding them the best food possible and you spend lots of time preparing meals and good clothes and great schools, why not spend time on emotional health?
On relationships.
And relationships and
problem
improving
solving, communication, all of those things. We have a saying at our clinic that EQ is more important than IQ, your emotional quotient. And that's really true. You can just be brilliant and be a dismal failure, or you can be a terribly unhappy person. You need to have intrapersonal skills, knowing yourself and being able to manage your own emotions. And you need to have interpersonal skills, getting along with family and friends and bosses and other people. Those are critical to your life success. So it's not just the good school that you go to or the good home and roof over your head.
And the good food, yes. There's a lot more to it. So to think proactively, to be able to make sure that from a broad, rounded perspective, you're taking this in consideration, because you never know. I mean, even though seemingly your child seems like they're happy, they're well groomed and self-esteem, they have the friends, they really may not really know. It's almost like a cavity.
Secret world.
It is. And I like the idea of trying to really improve communication with your child, and it's never too late to start. I love that too, because some parents are great. And some parents are a little bit, less interactive, maybe a little bit more shy, or respectful of their space. But these are moments and these are stages in the child's development that really matter, and they're super important. And we have one shot to get this right before they leave the house, or unless they just want to stay. And that's a whole other topic. That's another show, isn't it? Well, Susan, thank you so much for being on the show. This is excellent information. I learned a lot, and I hope that you did as well. You'll be able to access this show on our website, the Therapy Hour, and it's going to be, it's actually the Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy. There's a radio link, and also on YouTube. So you can just you can Google Dr. Istre's name, and your show should be circulating there, and it'll also air live Sunday at noon, December 3rd. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me,
Take
Rusty.
care. Bye-bye.